Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, here we are with episode 36 of the Samurai Brothers. Matthew, it's nice to be with you again.
Mm-hmm.
And hopefully the weather has been nice up there.
It did rain a little this last week, but being that this is a farming area, it's good for the farmers. So, and it staves off the inevitable heat wave that we'll eventually get.
And I've been seeing that you've been having some Keiko sessions up there, right, with the Sequoia team up in the Central Valley.
Yep, getting ready for the US Open.
Yep, that's right. In fact, I was out at the LA practice run by Andrew, and he brought in quite a few Mongolian guys that came in. There was a guy from the guy from Azerbaijan that you wrestled in the quarterfinals of the actual championship tournament last year. He was there too.
Uh-huh.
Semu, I think, was his name. And then they had a guy come in. He was a Ukrainian juniors medalist. So he hadn't been at it for a while. So yeah, a lot of people coming in and stuff. But fortunately for me, my shoulder wasn't acting up too much. So I think that I'll be ready to compete for the US Open.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. Well, then why don't we get right into it, Matthew? We were trying to touch on this last episode, but we ran out of time. So we want to talk about the transfer portal. And obviously, there were a lot of names that came in there. AJ Ferrari being the biggest name. And, I get a lot, I see, on in some of these Facebook and Instagram groups that I follow, a lot of people complain about the transfer portal being something that ruins the sport of wrestling. And you want to give an early take about that?
Well, it doesn't just ruin the sport of wrestling; it ruins every sport because even though for wrestling it doesn't, it fortunately it doesn't the transfer portal deadline isn't during the postseason. For both basketball and football, it's the deadline is during the postseason. So you'll have guys decide, oh, I want to transfer someone else, right in the middle of, the college football playoff, or in the case of March Madness, which, I'm just like, I'm it's like what happened? Well, A, what happened to school loyalty? And B, um, the transfer portal just absolutely ruined the concept of college sports. Like, I can understand things working out and you know, um, allowing a little bit more flexibility than the older system. Like, under the older system, I knew multiple times people who were screwed out of at least a semester. But that was just in NAIA. It was just a semester. You didn't get the sign off. It's like, it's like, okay, but and when Tom Brands first came back to Iowa from Virginia Tech, he brought a bunch of the guys with him, and Virginia Tech decides, oh, we're gonna screw you over and just destroy a year of these guys' eligibility. And it's just like, what are you doing? So I can understand creating a little bit more flexibility in terms of that kind of a situation, but the transfer portal is just the complete opposite of what happened. You've got no consequences to people transferring, and it's genuinely stupid. And I can understand situations like
Well, like for example, they're allowing obviously we have the unfortunate situation with the fact that Cleveland State is discontinuing the program. And so the NCAA actually allowed all those team members to enter the transfer portal early because of the news coming out of Cleveland State, for example.
Yeah, I can understand a situation like that, but it like I said, it's just, there's just certain situations where it's just
Well, and like for example, I mean, obviously you have AJ Ferrari is like the number one, name, within the transfer portal. Here, Bakersfield, gave him a chance, and now he's just flying the coop, going wherever he thinks he's gonna go, or got a couple of names here. Rocco Welsh from Ohio State. He's going to go to Penn State because obviously he wants to join the winning team. But I think, and like you're saying, with there being a situation with school loyalty, we have a couple people from Little Rock like Nasir Bailey, Jordan Williams. These are guys who have really helped. They've helped to elevate Little Rock. To being a competitive force within the NCAA, and especially with the Pac-12s, because Little Rock won the Pac-12 championships this year. But here they are going off, and now it's like, well, what becomes of Little Rock? Not to say that it's just these are the only two guys that are helping to elevate the program, but I kind of do call into question what that says about like you're saying, people are just going off, and there's no real consequences to that.
Yeah, and like I said, I understand team loyalty and coach loyalty and stuff like that. Like the last year that I was at MOBAP, the assistant coach Paul Collum signed on to go to Lindenwood Belleville, so he had guys who were who he personally recruited who followed him to Lindenwood Belleville. So I can understand a situation like that. And then, I keep bringing up the Brands situation where, it was stupid of Virginia Tech to do that. And then also, during the unfortunate situation of the Penn State Jerry Sandusky scandal, where the Penn State was just the program was just royally screwed because of some stupid decisions of
administration.
Yeah, and it's still hard to tell how much Joe Pa knew about that, but either way, it's like
we won't really get into that.
Yeah, because it's we don't want to get into
the details. I have to bring up another example about the transfer portal, and people are calling this a first, but I don't know if I would really, do you really want to put this in as an achievement? So I had seen the news about this. So Haley Van Lith, she's a female basketball player in the NCAA. And so she was playing for TCU this year, and they made it to the Elite Eight of the women's basketball tournament. She is the first player, male or female, to reach the Elite Eight with 3 different schools: Louisville, LSU, and TCU. So you want to talk about the transfer portal frenzy? It's like, there you go. Is it really a thing? Because another an interesting comment that I saw on a Facebook group was that it's not the NIL that's going to be that's ruining college sports. Is it changing that dynamic? Yes, I would say that I would say that yes, it would be changing the dynamic. But is it the sole cause of a lot of the issues that we're seeing right now? No, it's the transfer portal is really and I think in a way the transfer portal takes away from these smaller schools to be able to be competitive also.
Yeah, it's like you think of all those schools who were able to pull off the upsets, like Arizona State in wrestling, what was Texas Western at the time, now UT, University of Texas El Paso, the forget which Carolina school who won it in D1 baseball several years back. All those small underdog schools who have these Cinderella stories where they're no-name schools, and they get the right factors, and they're able to get their way they're able to win a championship. It's really hard to do that nowadays. That because they're going to get up there, and of course they can't. They're not going to have these giant NIL collectives. They're going to, if these guys are not already seniors, at these coaches are going to try to poach them, and they're going to go elsewhere. And it's again, that's one of these things I really, that NIL is definitely a factor in
factor.
It's a fact.
But
it's
the transfer
factor,
portal,
but it's not the only factor. But
the transfer portal is enabling them.
Yeah, exactly. If you had just NIL, then it would be a tad bit harder for to do these transfer portal jumps. But and I can't remember. I think it was San Jose State, where I think the quarterback was just like, I was promised this NIL money. I'm not going to go anymore. And and then on top of that, you had that ruling that the NIL rules aren't enforceable. They set NIL rules, and then it's just like, oh well, it's like these rules aren't enforceable, which essentially made it a free for all. And one thing that I will one thing I'll give one person in particular. So it's no secret that the current top and I find this ironic as well. They are not ironic but funny. But the current top ranked NIL athlete, Caitlin Clark was up there. Oh yeah, that's another thing. Props to Caitlin Clark for staying with Iowa all 4 years. I think she had a what's it called year? She had a COVID year, but she decided not to take it. She decided to go to
the WNBA.
The NBA, where her independent sponsorships are going to make a lot more than I don't even think she was originally signed for 6 digits, but her NBA sponsor, she was already making multiple millions of dollars from from NIL, and so she was, because of sponsorship rules in the WNBA, she was allowed to make more.
Well, the average salary in the WNBA is, I think, between $70,000 and $80,000.
Yeah,
the WNBA does not make money; it's subsidized by the NBA.
But my understanding is
all they want, but that's just the reality of things. The WNBA does not make money.
Yeah, well, the Caitlin Clark is making money.
Yeah, she makes money through the sponsorship deals.
Right. Well, it's
as
not
a whole,
just that
the league does not make money.
It's not just that her teams are making money everywhere. Right. What was it, Indiana? I forget what her team was, but basically every my understanding is what's happened is when she's gone, every single team that has her team was filling seats in their homes arena, so they were making money. And then every team that that hosted her team, like I said, I think it's Indiana, but they had to go to larger venues in order to fill the seats. Yeah, so I think it's called the Caitlin Clark effect. But I digress. The point is that she actually, stuck with the transfer portal, but even she was not the top earning NIL person. The top NIL person, and I think she's gonna graduate too, was gymnast Olivia Dunn, and she's been at LSU her whole career.
Yeah,
but that's because not only is she winning individual titles, I think LSU actually is in the running for
the national title.
Yeah, national title, but she also has a good rapport with her coach. So that's one of those things where, it's like you could have, which That is another thing. It's like, it's like what not just team loyalty, coach loyalty. I can understand coaches going from one school to another. It's like, that happens all the time. But if you have one coach who gave you a chance, you would not be doing anything. It's now granted there's multiple other coaches who tried to recruit good prospects. But if you go in, this coach gave you a chance and you're like, oh, I'm going to bail to someone who I have a better chance at winning a national title with. And it's just like, what happened to the loyalty?
Which you got kind of gotta call into effect though. You probably could call it the Kale effect. Everybody seems to want to go to Penn State and that, every once in a while, it's like, why would these people want to go to Penn State? Because Penn State keeps winning,
right. They're
Everyone can hate
consistent.
on Penn State all they want, but it's like Kale at this point, he doesn't really have to do a lot of talking. He just keeps churning out the national championships, and everybody sees that, and they want that chance now.
Well, and he's still making efforts to actually recruit and actually get guys in an actual pipeline. He's not just if the opportunity comes, he'll recruit from the transfer portal, but he's still making an effort to do
Bring in the
traditional
younger guys,
recruiting
yeah.
from so that's where that's where he's got the mentality of let's actually build in team, because if I get these guys, because if he gets these guys, they're not going to be there the whole time.
Now, here's the interesting thing I find about Kale's, his record so far at Penn State. So the one thing I've seen, this is his third 4-peat now. Can he make it a 5-peat this time? Your response to that?
It's certainly possible. The thing is, it's always been a little bit more complicated because well, even before the transfer portal, he wasn't always consistently winning titles. It's just one of those things where just because of how the
recruiting
landscape
team
changed,
mm-hmm.
that he hasn't always been able to consistently
have people.
Right, because you do have brands and you do have
now he's got David Taylor.
Oh yeah, that's another thing, is that his and hands off to his protege David Taylor. We do need to emphasize that, is that David Taylor is his protege. So and you can't really blame him for going elsewhere. It's like, what's the likelihood that he's gonna the likelihood that Kale's gonna retire?
Not anytime soon.
not anytime. Yeah, the likelihood he's gonna retire within the next decade is rather low. So
especially if he keeps winning.
Well, yeah, but one thing I am going to point out is that I was looking up. So there's been one other team that has gone on a that has replicated the 9-peat, like the Kale 9-peat, and that is our friends in the NAIA at Grandview, because as we've said before, Grandview is the top dog in that.
Well, to slightly correct you, so Kale, all his championships have come in sets of 4.
Right.
So, but yeah, you're right. He could have a chance at replicating a 9-peat, similar to what Iowa did and what Grandview has done now. Because obviously, right now in NAIA, there's no other team that's more dominant than Grandview. And then you had Gable's Iowa back in the, what was it, 70s, 80s, during that time. Very dominant team.
90s. Don't forget the 90s.
And I gotta wonder though, it's like, people that complain about how PSU is dominating the sport right now, I gotta wonder if anybody was complaining about how Gable was dominating, Gable and Iowa, if they were dominating the sport. Hey, were you complaining about them? I'd really like to hear that, but maybe it's because it's a bunch of Iowa fans complaining about PSU. So anyway, yeah. So that, and one last note I'd like to make, though, I'm looking at comparing numbers and stuff between like the transfer portal from last year versus what it was this year, and you know what? It's not really that much different. It's like you're getting around 120, 130 wrestlers that are just transferring around, you know, and that's how things are going with that. So we'll see. I mean, I guess it would be interesting to see how things end up with, where Ferrari goes, where some of these other guys go. But as long as it's like this, we'll be seeing it, and I guess we just take it as it is. It's just how the college sports landscape is now. So,
Well, something I was going to point out is why am I drawing a blank? Wyatt Henriksen. That's one of those situations where you can kind of understand because he'd used up his
yeah, he used up his eligibility, and then Air Force wasn't going to give him the 5th year.
Yeah, Air Force has a way of doing things, and it's like, okay, that's just how they're gonna do it. So I guess was he a transfer, or was he technically a grad?
I think it would be a grad. Well, I mean, at that point you are a grad, I think, but I think you're still. I think he was still using the COVID year though.
That was, well, yeah. He was a graduate, but he had that COVID year, which made it kind of a unique situation. Yeah, that is something that is kind of unique. Is that even without the COVID year, is that they were giving what's it called? Is that it's if you used up your eligibility, then you could be a grad and do another sport. So
Yeah.
I don't recall there being too many grads who went into wrestling afterwards. I know that there were situations where some grads who wrestled would go into football afterwards.
Right.
But well, yeah, there was this one time where I remember I don't know if I mentioned it, but there was this one guy who was a what's it called? There was this one guy who I remember watching the football championship, and this guy had a COVID year. He had an injury redshirt year, and then he had a regular redshirt year. So he'd been involved in college football for a total of like 6 years or something like that. 6-7 years, something. It was like an unusually long amount of time. It's not something that the average players involved in. So, but yeah, that's just the situation. I'm glad that the NAIA did not cave and create a transfer portal.
Yeah.
They I think what happened was I think they probably loosened the rules like how the NAIA should have, but they don't have a transfer portal.
So next month, the US Open for wrestling, just like the US Open for sumo that we will be competing in, Sequoia Sumo Club will be competing at the US Sumo Open. But Matthew, the festivities, and actually I think they will have it later. It's either later this month or early next month, the US Open. And
I think I was reading it's going to be at the end of April. Yeah.
Yeah. In Las Vegas, where it's been for a number of years. And basically, this is to get to the World Team Trials, obviously. And just kind of going down the list, there's a number of names.
It's one of 2 tournaments domestically that get you into the World Team Trials.
Right.
The other being the Bill Farrell.
Yeah, the Bill Farrell Open. Yeah. I'm seeing a number of names here. For example, at 61 kilos, we've got people like Dayton Fix. We've got Austin DeSanto. One name I recognize, and that's only because I recognize him from California JC Wrestling, Christopher Betancourt. He was a wrestler at Mount San Antonio College and a state champion, 3C2A state champion. Seeing Seth Gross also on the list for 61 kilos. And if we're going into 65, well, let me see here. Number of names here. Real Woods. We know him transferring from Stanford to Iowa, for example. And as we're going down the list here, I mean, I'm sure a number of these people have, gone on, but it's like when there's so many of them, it's just like hard to keep up with all of them, right? But obviously, the one name that definitely comes up here, Yanni Diakomalis from Cornell fame. 70 kilos is his weight class that he'll be competing in. And while I'm kind of going on the list, I should mention for anyone who does not know that anyone who All Americans at the NCAA championships does qualify for the World Team Trials. So that's why you probably won't see a lot of those guys who would have wrestled at this tournament. They probably aren't going to be competing at the US Open because, they will already be qualified. However, I do believe, Matthew, as I recall in the past, winning the Open does get you a little bit higher seeding at the World Team Trials.
Yeah, I think it might get you at the what's called the
Final X?
finals.
Or yeah, the finals of the World Team Trials themselves, and then I think
No. Wait. It gets you into it might get you into the semifinals.
Oh yes, I think you're right. The semifinals at the World Team Trials, because the Final X is the finals for the tournament. Here's another one. David Carr. We know him from Iowa State, obviously, wrestling there. He'll be wrestling at 74 kilos. So, I mean, that's kind of a thing why, it's like you and I were kind of we're little fish in a very, very, very big pond, don't you think? It would be very hard to be competitive at the US Open.
Yeah. Well, if we did freestyle, I'm thinking about maybe trying out for Greco.
Yeah. Well, there's always the Masters divisions too, if we can kind of get ourselves back into shape here. Here's a name that seems to be a bit of a perennial name to come up, which is Zahid Valencia from Bosco and ASU fame. And looks like he's at the Cowboy RTC. So he's out in Oklahoma right now, which is interesting.
Well, he's got a right to go wherever. Something interesting is the whole concept of the regional training centers and stuff like that. I actually looked things up. For the longest time, I thought that it was again talking about a somewhat controversial subject, but originally I thought it was the team. I thought it was Team Foxcatcher that was kind of the original concept to
progenitor.
Yeah, the progenitor of the concept of a wrestling team. It turns out I was wrong. It was Sunkissed Kids by almost as much as 20 years. Sunkissed Kids was created in the 70s. Team Foxcatcher was created, I think, in either the late 80s or early 90s. So it wasn't it was more like Team Foxcatcher kind of took the concept and
It kind of ran with it.
Yeah.
To an extent.
Yeah, but the reality is the regional training centers are basic or more I forget if the Sunkissed Kids is listed as a regional training center, but
I think they're supposed. Well, even if they're not, I mean,
they basically are.
Right.
So yeah, so basically the concept of the regional training centers are more
and I see
after the Sunkissed Kids.
Well, like for example, I do see a lot of like Titan Mercury still coming up from time to time here and there. Although I don't, for what Sunkissed was, not seeing a lot of them on here. At least on
Well,
this list.
I know that Helen Marlis, at one point was practicing out the Sunkissed Kids.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that the Sunkissed Kids produces at least one Olympian every Olympics.
Yeah, not really seeing where they might be right now. I'm kind of wondering though, whether we'll be seeing. I do see, there does seem to be quite a bit of some California entries, especially coming from the women.
California has always been kind of a hub for training the women. Because
Yeah.
when Victoria Anthony was up there, she was involved in that. When Tatiana Padilla or Tatiana Suarez, I keep wanting to call her by her, the name I knew her as in high school. But when she was involved in wrestling, she trained primarily out of California. So it's California is still kind of a training hub for women's international wrestling. I think Clarissa Chun was another one when she was
Yes.
actively
Yes.
on the circuit.
Right.
So and it still is, because like when I was when I was at MOBAP, a lot of the women's wrestlers were coming out of California.
Right.
So
I mean, because California still has, is the most populous in terms of, I think, wrestling, men and women's. Obviously the level, if you want to talk about the level, that's a whole nother story, which as we're running short on time, obviously, that's something we could tackle in another episode. It's like ranking, the states by wrestling level. So with that being said, though, yeah, I'm looking at Greco too, and really the only names I'm recognizing are people like, you got Adam Kuhn, Colton Schultz. I mean, other than that, I'm not really recognizing a lot of names, and obviously, if we're not in this, we're not going to really know a lot of names. It's just because it's just gotten so big, wouldn't you say?
well, that, and there's like a constant rotation nowadays, and the concept nowadays is that a lot of people will go to other sports. They'll go where the money is, and typically nowadays that's in
MMA.
that's in MMA, but pro wrestling has kind of been revitalizing into kind of an alternative right now. I mean, we saw that with Gable Stevenson. And so yeah, so yeah, there's just that higher turnover, because it's like and that was kind of always a thing, because you had Team Quest with Dan Henderson, Kale Sonnen, Randy Couture, Matt Lindland. Those guys were all Olympic level or world level wrestlers before they went into the original, or the style versus style MMA. And then that just kept going with guys like, Daniel Cormier, where after his Olympic career, he decided to go in MMA. So,
Well, Matthew, with that being said, we're going to be running short on time. Next time, we want to really get into the One Piece chapters, because things are really taking a turn in the Elbaf situation.
yeah, and that would be a time to talk about it, considering that we're going to be on one of those
We do have a
breaks.
break coming up, so next week we'll be reviewing chapters 44 and 1000 was it 1144 and 1145.
Wait a minute, I just realized, are we going to be able to do that?
Next week, oh yes, well we'll see how the schedule turns out, but we can figure it out by then.
Yeah.
If not, then we could do Monday, obviously. But with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you once again for tuning in. And Matthew, as always, thank you for your color commentary. And any last words before we're off?
I mean, we'll just keep doing what we'll be
Doing
doing.
what we're doing.
Yep.
All right. Well, with that, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you for tuning in to episode 36 of the Samurai Brothers, and we will see you all next time.